Welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast. I'm Janey Lee Grace. This is for you if you've quit the booze or you'd like to, or maybe you're just sober curious. I'll bring you tips and motivation without any judgment, and there'll be inspiration from experts, quit-lit authors, and sober heroes. Welcome to the podcast Alcohol Free Life, and thank you for your lovely messages regarding the interview last time with behavioural change expert and author of The Kindness Method, Shahroo Izadi. It was just great to talk to her. I love her work, and it was really funny actually this week because we both crossed paths with a big time celeb in completely different places. I saw Shahroo post on social media a pic of the esteemed actor Kelsey Grammer holding up her book, The Kindness Method. So cool. And then a couple of days after that, I hadn't expected it, but he came into the show that I'm part of on BBC Radio 2, and I just had to grab a selfie with him. So I put that on social media as well. It's a shame I couldn't get an endorsement for the podcast, but hey ho. We are still in the mode of giving away lovely natural gifts, so I'm sure you've heard me say that I'm working with the charity My Yard. All you have to do is use the hashtag Stay Dry Till July, and we're asking you for your self-care tips, big or small, and we're giving away some lovely prizes. We've got some great supplements from Viridian Nutrition to give away. Don't forget as well, we have an event coming up. Grab a pen if you haven't already heard me talk about this. The event is called Self-Care for the Sober Curious. But really, it's great for anyone interested in the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So maybe you've given up drinking, or maybe you've always been teetotal. Maybe you're thinking of cutting down. Maybe you're just a little bit sober curious. You've heard about mindful drinking and you're just wondering what it's all about. So we're holding a very informal meetup with alcohol-free drinks and vegan nibbles. It is free. We'd welcome a donation to the charity My Yard, but that's not compulsory. It's Monday, the 11th of March at the newly renovated Jago Club in Dalston in London. So we've obviously got limited tickets. So if you can book through Eventbrite, because it's a small exclusive affair, all you have to do is just Google Eventbrite and My Yard, or you can go to the My Yard website. And the great news is we've got Claire Pooley, author of The Sober Diaries, is going to be popping up and speaking, and also Lee and Sean from apparel brand Rock Sober. They've got such a great story to tell. So inspirational. So yeah, just go to Eventbrite, type in My Yard, or you can go to the website myyard.org.uk to secure your free tickets. Still in February, of course, and still focusing on self-love and kindness and compassion and self-esteem. And my guest today is Patrick Regan OBE. He is such an inspirational guy, encourages us to embrace our imperfections and recognise that despite being perhaps a little broken, we are still valuable. Now, Patrick is the founder and CEO of Kintsugi Hope. It's a charity that aims to create safe and supportive spaces for those suffering from emotional and mental health challenges. And it follows a series of personal trials and ill health that affected Patrick and his family. He'll talk about this because previously he was in his role as CEO at XLP, which is another charity that supported young people. They did incredible work, but he stepped down from that. Now, Patrick has travelled to over 30 countries working with and on behalf of the poorest communities. He's a regular contributor in the UK on radio and on TV on issues of poverty and justice. And he received the Mayor of London Peace Award in 2010 for his valuable contribution towards peace and justice. And he was also awarded an OBE, as I've already said, from Her Majesty the Queen for services to young people. So this is one heck of a guy. He is incredible. He's passionate. He's an amazing communicator, and just as much at home on the main stage of major UK political party conferences through to, his work in local communities, whether that's speaking to inmates in a security prison, high security prison, or to gang leaders in Jamaica. He really does get across all kinds of genres to do the work that he does. He's also the author of 5 books, and his latest book is called Honesty Over Silence, where he opens up his heart on some very personal issues and explores the importance of holding on to faith and God through challenging times. So we pre-recorded the interview a little while back. Enjoy this interview with Patrick Regan. So I'm absolutely delighted to be speaking with Patrick Regan, and Patrick is founder of the charity KintsugiHope.com, but he has an illustrious past. Is that how I should say it? Patrick, welcome. I really appreciate it.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being a guest. Patrick, will you tell us a bit about your background? Because you've done some amazing work. You have all kinds of accolades. Tell us a bit about what you've done in the past with various charities before you started doing the work that you do now.
Yeah, well, 22 years ago now, I started a charity called XLP and in response to a stabbing in our local school. And the school was devastated by the stabbing, so rang the local church up where I was a youth worker and said, "Can you help us?" And the vicar knew how rough the school was, so didn't really fancy it, and so sent me as a local youth worker. I went into the school, tried to find out what the key issues were. This school had 65 mother tongue languages in it. The kids weren't thick or stupid. We had kids wearing bulletproof vests to school. 14-year-old girls who were desperate to get pregnant because they wanted the baby to love them, and they didn't want any bloke getting away. So I found 17 people to give me £25 a month, and I started XLP. And XL stood for wanting kids to excel in everything they do, and P stood for project. And over 22 years, it just grew and grew and grew, and doing a whole range of intervention programs. I think when I left, it worked with 1,600 young people a week, which is incredible, doing all sorts of amazing things. So yeah, and as a CEO, your job changes. You go from doing all the youth work yourself to fundraising. You get into business management, and you just work incredibly hard, don't you? And so I was that person. I was an activist. I traveled to about 42 different countries. We had visits from the royal family and a lot from the media as well. So it was a roller coaster over 22 years.
Yeah. And does that charity still exist?
Yeah, it's doing really well as far as I know. Yeah, it's still there. I left about a year ago now, and they're still doing some great stuff.
Tell us about the reason for you leaving then, or what inspired you to start working with Kintsugi Hope, or founding it, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, I guess during the last sort of, 6-7 years really, when I was working in XLP, I guess I was that typical leader, and I guess we're all a bit like this, where you work really, really hard, and then you burn out, and then you rest a bit, and then you burn out again. I always say it's like putting your phone on charge for 10 minutes, and actually your phone works fine on 10% as well as it works on 100%. It just doesn't last as long. And I was definitely that person. I was constantly burning myself out. And then I got some health challenges. I needed to have major limb reconstruction surgery on my legs. Family members got very sick. Dad got cancer. My sister, my daughter was very, very ill. And I don't know. I used to describe it as the Tetris moment. Do you remember the game Tetris?
Yeah.
The blocks fall out of the sky, and you're trying to get them in a line. And then as soon as you get them in a line, another load come, and it gets faster and faster. And eventually you just get game over. I can't do this anymore. And so I was in a really low point, and I started to blog about some of my experiences and how I felt. I was always a churchgoer. I used to go to church every Sunday, but I felt really lonely, and because I felt like there was something wrong with me, because other people seemed to be doing okay around me. And that was hard as well. And so I started putting some of those thoughts on paper. I wrote a book called When Faith Gets Shaken, and I was amazed at the response, and just a bit of honesty. And one of the things I found in that experience was this Japanese art called Kintsugi, which basically, if we break a bowl in this country, we tend to mend it with super glue, and we hide the cracks.
Yeah.
And what they do in Japan is they put a gold powder in the glue. So instead of hiding the cracks, they make a feature of the cracks. And the whole idea is it's more beautiful for being broken, and it's certainly more unique. You wouldn't find a bowl like it on planet Earth. And I realized, particularly around mental health, emotional health, and all the things I was going through, I didn't have to be ashamed of it. And I think that was the challenge. I needed to break the shame and the stigma. So I started to write, and I did a new book called Honesty Over Silence, which does exactly that.
Yeah. Let me just pick you up on I mean, it's not the focus of what we're going to talk about, but I'm just really interested, when with the book, When Faith Gets Shaken, and with your experience around that. This is something that I've found many times sort of over the years, is that certainly within churches where one would hope you have, kind of like a huge amount of support around you. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And I don't know whether this is just my perception, but for me, it would appear that certainly within the Christian church, there's a lot of focus on outreach and evangelism and the kind of outworking, but there's not tremendous amount of focus on personal development and self-care and kind of looking after people when the chips are down, as it were, which seems to be what you're saying. Everyone else seemed to be just fine, and you were the one whose faith was shaken. I'm not even sure what my question is, but is that something that you would that you've noticed?
I mean, I think it's a number of issues. I think there's an issue of theology, because I think that there was a theology that was like, you just need to have more faith and pray harder.
Yes, exactly.
And like, if you suffer from anxiety, almost the last thing you want is someone to tell you that you need to pray harder.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the best you can. And then if you're not careful, as well as suffering from anxiety, you end up suffering for guilt.
Yeah.
For suffering from anxiety.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, we all break. We all life, whether you've got faith or not. And I mean, I'm sure faith acts as an inspiration to so many people, and it's important to know that you're loved and you're cared for by God and stuff. But I think the challenge for me was the lack of honesty. And I feel like church in every community across this country has got an amazing opportunity, and at its basis is always caring for those people who feel broken and feel marginalized. And I was definitely one of those people. So I guess my experiences were mixed. I felt lonely. I felt a bit isolated. I felt a bit guilty. There were some people who were amazing. And I think the other thing in church, sometimes and I'm a bit like this sometimes, we want to fix you. Sometimes people don't want to be fixed. They just want to be loved. And we always have to have an answer to why something's happening to you. And it's interesting watching Cold Feet. I don't know if you're a fan of Cold Feet.
Yeah.
And the breast cancer story. And it was like, please don't tell me it's going to be okay. Just be there for me, was what Janey was saying to her friend. And I think there is a sense of that we need people just to be alongside and not have to offer answers or solutions the whole time. And
sure. Well, that's very much. I mean, there's been a lot of people listening to this who have had battled with addiction or had their hassles with wanting to give up the booze or change some kind of behaviour. And I think it's very interesting that when you start out, particularly, I mean, we're looking at all different grey areas of drinking, if you like. We're not necessarily talking about people who are rock bottom. You might be high bottomed, as the phrase is, but you've still got your own stuff going on. But the interesting thing is, an awful lot of people in that position feel very alone. They really feel alone. They don't know how they're going to deal with anything, but most of all, they feel like they're the only ones there. And it's finding other people who feel the same way. And as you say, just knowing that there's somebody there for you. I mean, what changed for you then? You wrote this blog post, you shared how you were feeling. What started to get you back on track, as it were? What were the kind of practical things that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a whole load of things. I mean, the book, Honesty Over Silence, it sort of has 6 chapters on learning to let go of things. And I use this illustration that how to trap a monkey. And apparently what they do is they get a coconut, they make a hole in the coconut, they put some food in the coconut, they tie the coconut to a tree, and the monkey comes along and sticks its hand in, but refuses to let go. It just wants the food, and then the hunter comes along and captures it. And all it needs to do to get free is to let go. And I think, well, maybe I need to let go of the pretend smile, pretending to everyone it's all okay. It's not working. It's not getting me anywhere. I need to let go of the clock, because, it's like when you go to the doctors, isn't it? When you're unwell, you want a definite day you're going to get better. Can you tell me when this is going to be better for me? And of course, doctors never do that. You want a definite, but learning to accept uncertainty is learning to beat anxiety is learning to accept uncertainty. I think the key, though, for me was learning about self-compassion. And I always thought self-compassion was selfish. I thought I'm an activist. I'm about justice and about alleviating poverty. And I thought I don't need self-compassion.
Yeah, it
And
felt self-indulgent for you, didn't it? I suppose. Yeah.
And that is the key. That I realized that self-compassion and self-indulgence were two very different things.
Yeah.
And that self-compassion actually takes discipline.
Yes.
It means that you might need to get yourself to the gym. It means you don't have that extra glass of wine just to take the edge off. And I realized that self-compassion is actually talking to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend. Because I would never treat my best friend the way I talk to myself. I have these incredibly high standards, and yet I wouldn't dream of putting them on someone else. But I talk to myself like that all the time. And so I realized that self-compassion isn't self-indulgence. Self-compassion isn't the same as self-esteem. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. And it's not the same as self-pity. Self-pity is when it is all about me. And so I had to change my thought process and realize that not all my thoughts are my friends. My wife used to say that to me. Don't always listen to your thoughts. Learn to question them and doubt them sometimes.
Yeah.
And that was helpful as I started the journey to recovery.
Sure. And so once we've kind of accepted that, then, because I think that is a big one, it's something that I'm talking about a lot on this podcast, the importance of self-compassion and kindness to yourself as well as to others, and self-care. I'm really, really interested in your take on this whole the concept of kintsugi, really. I mean, it really appeals to me. Years ago I started my website, which is Imperfectly Natural, and that's all about and that's all about doing the bits you can in terms of the products you buy and the sort of eco aspects of life. Yeah. But I called it that because at the time, when I wrote that book, I'm very grateful that I did, actually, because otherwise I'd have been lynched 1,000 times over, because of course I'm not perfect. Of course I'm not green enough, and I'm not as eco as I ought to be, and not every single thing that I buy is without chemicals, although I'm working on it. So that imperfectly natural approach for me has been the absolute core of the work that I do. And I really love the way that this this concept of kintsugi is accepting, what you're talking about is accepting that we're not perfect. Yeah. Now, once we accept that, then what's next? Because I can sort of almost imagine somebody thinking, particularly if they are suffering from anxiety or depression, you don't want it to be a case of, oh, okay, that's all right, then I can accept that I'm not great. Oh, right, I'll just be down in the dumps forever, if you see what I mean. It's not a well-phrased question, but I suppose I'm trying to say, where's the happy medium, if you like, between the self-help kind of courses that tell us that all we have to do is manifest abundance and we'll be abundant. Look in the mirror, say you're beautiful and we'll be beautiful. Where do we find the happy medium between positivity and manifesting that we have everything, and accepting, as you're saying, that we're broken, we're flawed?
Yeah. It's a fascinating question, and my PA, she's from France. She's so funny. She WhatsApped me the little image the other day, and it was a word called flawsome. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, with the FLAWE. Yeah.
I thought she was making it up. I thought she's lost the plot now, I tell you. And I realised it means to accept your flaws and realise that you're awesome regardless. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. But I do think you're right. I think it's about going to the root causes. And my friend uses an illustration. At the pier, you get this game, whack-a-mole. I don't know if you remember it. Yeah. And he said sometimes anxiety, depression, perfectionism, they're popping up all the time. And we sort of feel like, the best way to deal with it is to whack it and get rid of it, or do this and do that. And he says, well, what we've got to do is we've got to work out why are those things happening. Yeah. And he says the driver to most of those things is a sense of shame. And I think, and shame and guilt are very different things. Guilt is, I've done something wrong. Shame is I am wrong. And Brené Brown famously says that shame loves silence, secrecy, and judgment. It has two voices. Who do you think you are, and you're not enough?
Yeah.
And to step out of shame means you own your story. And it doesn't mean that you accept that you always have to be, those things that are challenging and negative to you, that you're always just going to be the way you are, because otherwise you lose hope. But it just accepts that this is where I am right now. And I've realized for me, a big thing is that my strengths are also my weaknesses. I'm quite a sensitive person. I hope that I have great empathy for people. I really care about people. The flip side of that is anxiety.
Yeah.
So I've learned I have to manage my anxiety.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get rid of that strength, because that's part of me. And I manage that through different ways, whether that's through building, solid relationships, whether that's through exercise, whether that's through diet. I know I have to manage it. I know there's no magic wand that's going to come along. And so where I accept myself is I'm still trying to manage and change, and but to keep me, the uniqueness of me. I don't want to be something I'm not. I don't want to. Brené Brown also says there's a big difference between fitting in and belonging.
Yeah. And
often we ask people fit in, and actually what they just want to do is belong. And I think you can belong without having to fit in and be like everyone else. And,
yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting debate to think through.
I think you're right. We are incredibly hard on ourselves in a way that we wouldn't be with other people. As one of the groups that I'm part of, where people are giving up drinking, there's a lot of people who will say that they've had a relapse or whatever. They'll say, I've done 100 days or 180 days or 5 days or whatever it is, and I'm absolutely devastated. I hate myself. I've relapsed, or I've had a drink. And it's like, come on, how about celebrating the days you've done? Because it's an incredible achievement. And also, whenever you talk about booze, of course, there's a ton of shame and guilt around it. If someone gives up smoking, we all go, oh wow, well done you, that's really cool. If you give up drinking, everyone goes, oh dear, did you have a big problem then? How awful for you, but just have one. So we have all this stuff in our culture around it. But what I've really noticed is the way people, are very, very, very hard on themselves when they trip up effectively. Now, again, we don't want to try and suggest that everyone that it's completely fine, just constantly trip up, because of course you want to strive to be the best you can. But it is this, I think you nailed it when you kind of said, it's about thinking how you would react to a friend. Because if that was a close friend, it's like the toddler thing, isn't it? If a toddler starts to try and walk, and falls down, you don't say, oh, for goodness sake, you're clearly useless. You say, wow, you're doing great. Back up, try again. So I guess it is trying to work out how do we speak to people, to ourselves, the way we would others.
Absolutely, and there's something so attractive about kindness, respect, dignity, those sort of attributes. To me, that's when I think that person is an incredibly attractive person, because they ooze that. I was doing the mental health first aid course about 6 months ago.
Oh, I like the sound of that. What is that?
Well, it's brilliant. It's come over from Australia, and it's a 2-day course. I mean, businesses are literally sending all their employees on it at the moment, and it's looking at how you can have healthy mental health, in your workplace, in your business, in your charity, in your school. And but the person who was lecturing, who was giving the training, she went, who here self-harms? And everyone starts looking at the floor, looking at shoelaces. And she went, who here has ever just had 3 or 4 drinks after a night because you're so stressed? Everyone puts their hands up. And she's like, who here has ever done retail therapy when you're absolutely skint, but you've gone and spent loads of money, which in later weeks has put you under a huge amount of pressure and stress? Everyone puts their hands up. Who here is just eating junk food because life is difficult? And then she was like, well, who here self-harms? And then, of course, everyone's still got their hands in the air. And I think so often it's so easy to jump into judgment without recognizing that all of us have an element of that sort of addiction in ourselves. And a lot of us have approval addiction. We're constantly trying to prove ourselves to other people. We're constantly worried about what the other people think. We're constantly mind reading. I know what they think of me, and it's not positive. And they might not be thinking about you at all. And so I think the key thing is about staying out of judgment, and empathy is really coming alongside. And I think a lot of people don't do that, because to do that, you have to get in touch with a part of yourself that feels a little bit broken.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we've done at Kintsugi Hope, we've done a course, emotional mental health course, similar to the AA course on Alcoholics Anonymous, but around emotional mental health, looking at different aspects like forgiveness. That's been fascinating. We've got someone on our course whose parents are split up, and it's been quite difficult. And they're like, well, how do you forgive someone who's not sorry?
Yeah.
How do you forgive someone, doesn't even think they've done anything wrong? That really affects people. So we talked about that. We talked about anger, and how actually anger is an emotional response to pain. And I always say to people, let anger be a visitor, but don't let it become a resident, because when you're hurt, of course you're angry, and suppressed anger is no good for anyone. And so we did this course because we recognize, like AA and like all the other great movements out there, whether it's rock choir or park run or Weight Watchers, actually there is so much power in coming together, supporting one another with no gender, and saying, yeah, me too, I struggle with that, and I'm here to support you. And so that's what Kintsugi Hope really wants to do.
Amazing. Can we just touch just briefly on the part that social media plays in all of this? I mean, particularly for young people, actually increasingly for all of us. But we were talking earlier about the charity and about it's very interesting, this first mental health first aid course you're talking about, because one thing that I think I've really realised in recent months and years, if you like, is that emotional well-being is not taught in schools, like at all. We are not helped as to how we deal with our emotions. I mean, we also not helped as to how we buy a house or handle someone's funeral. But that's a conversation for another day. But the emotional well-being. I mean, I think I did read recently that mindfulness, some techniques of mindfulness are going to be introduced in schools. Well, thank goodness. But just basics around emotional well-being are not addressed. And then you've got the flip side, which is that, of course, in recent years, people are on social media where everyone's life looks fabulous and amazing, and everyone's beautiful and airbrushed. I mean, it must be having a massive impact on young people.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that, your brain literally cannot take that amount of stimulation. It's constantly going. It's the first thing you look at when you wake up. It's the last thing you look at before you go to bed. And of course, what we then do is we just compare ourselves, constantly comparing ourselves to everyone else's life.
Yeah.
And of course, we're only often showing the show reel. We're not showing the behind the scenes. And I guess going back to my experience of church, I often felt like the preaching was the show reel. It was always amazing story after amazing story. Actually, some of the best sermons I heard were people going, I've kept my faith, but you know what? I've been through domestic violence, or my relationship has broken up, or I've just had a miscarriage and I don't know how to process it, but I've kept my faith. For me, they were far more inspiring sermons than just everything's great and God's going to heal you and it's all going to be okay. You just need to have some more faith. And I think with our young people I totally agree with you. In our schools, it's the perfectionism thing. It's killing them. It's we put grades before people. We put performance before people. My teenage daughter's 16, absolute mess about her GCSEs.
Yeah.
And I've sat her down and said, you know what, your kindness means more to me than your grades.
Absolutely.
And the way you treat people means more to me. And yet we're developing a culture where, employers used to say to me, some of your young people, they've got no resilience. They quit so quickly. If it's not there in an instant, they haven't built that sense of teamwork and ethics and compassion. And so, I believe our education system needs a little bit of an overhaul. I think you look at it, self-harm is up, a lot of anxiety is up. Again, to quote Brené Brown one more time, it's like she says, we are the most medicated, obese, addicted cohort in history. Yeah. We can't just carry on. Something has to change. And I think education is a real key. My son turned to me a couple of days ago and he said, Dad, in your life, have you ever used a stem leaf diagram?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I was sort of trying to encourage him to carry on with his homework. And I was going, I'm just wondering how useful it's going to be in the future, Dad. And I was like, well, I'm sure you'll do what you says. But it's okay, that stuff. But there's so much they're missing out on around how you cope with life.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we bring this concept of kintsugi into our lives then? How can we use it?
Well, I think there's so much power in being together in community. I think that if you look at the most recent stats, they're frightening in terms of loneliness,
Yeah.
And we've just been talking about social media. We are the most connected generation in history, and yet we're the most lonely. We've got GPs are saying to us they're seeing more lonely people than they've ever done before.
Yeah.
Amongst the elderly in our community, people are incredibly isolated. The statistic that came out recently that loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
We have a minister for loneliness. We have a minister for suicide prevention. We've got over 6,000 people taking their lives. I was doing a thing on the BBC the other day, and the guy said, if there's 6,000 people each year being eaten by bears in this country,
we'd be dealing with it. Absolutely.
If there was like 100 people being eaten by bears, we'd be having inquiries and focus groups and this. Yeah. And yet people get to such a low place. Yeah. And I think people need hope. And for me, hope is saying, this will pass. Yeah. This will pass. That's hope. It will pass eventually. You need to hang on in there. You need to keep going. You need to get good people around you who look at you and see your potential. And the best way to do that is by being with people that journey together, bit of humility, come together and work through some of these issues. And that's what we're trying to encourage people to do. So we're going to be running these groups in people's homes, in Costa Coffees, in prisons and schools. We've just got one started last week in a homeless hostel.
Wow.
The guys are loving it. There are 5 guys in there talking about things that affect their lives. And then at the end of it, they get together and they talk about what can we carry on doing that will support each other's mental health. And they've got dog walking classes. They've got just meeting up for coffee once a month, right through to sort of, or maybe you could do some sort of singing or some choir together. So doing stuff together, sharing in a common task, I think is really crucial. We've got to do it together in a community.
Yeah. So tell us, a couple of the different sort of aspects of the work the charity does, and you've already mentioned these groups. How can people kind of find out more about you and get involved with the charity?
Yeah, I mean, the best way, we've literally just started, so I've been going the last year, so we've growing very rapidly, but so we're not the finished article at all. And one of the things we say about the groups, actually, it's not counselling and it's not therapy. It's self-management tools, it's peer support, and it's signposting to specialist help if you need it. But the best way to find out about it is on the website, kintsugihope.com. Yeah. That's KINTSUGI. And there's loads of information on there. The other things we're trying to do, interesting, you mentioned the education system. We're working in some policy areas to look at why there's such a big issue around mental health, what's driving that issue. So we're thinking a lot around education, employment again. The reason why a lot of people get signed off long term is because of depression, anxiety. Before we sign them off, could we actually offer them CBT? Could we offer them some therapy? Could we offer them some help? Because often when they get signed off, they're there. That's it. They don't come back.
That's right. On that note, actually, again, it's a topic for another day, but I heard an amazing talk. Of course, I've completely forgotten his name, but a fascinating GP who is very involved in social prescribing. And there's a really funky general practitioners I think it's in East London, and they're doing the most incredible work because they're engaging properly with their community. All the things you're talking about here, and they absolutely don't just sign people off of work. They absolutely get them involved in the cafe that as part of the hub.
Of
It's
course,
incredible, completely different way of offering a GP surgery. Really, I mean, it seems so obvious when you see it. He showed some slides of this community, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that looks nothing like any kind of GP surgery I've ever come across.
Amazing.
Anyway, right. Well, we could talk for hours. I love the stuff that you're doing. I love the concept. So the book, Honesty Over Silence, is out now, right?
Yeah, you can get that on Amazon or whatever. Yeah.
Great. Well, I wish you all the best with it. And,
Thank you so much.
If I invite you back in a year, or what would you hope would have changed? I mean, what would you hope would have happened for Kintsugi Hope, and also, sort of generally within our culture?
I mean, I guess what I really hope is that, I mean, in terms of Kintsugi Hope, I really hope we start to see hundreds of groups across this country where people can come and feel not judged, but feel loved, felt supported, felt like they could be honest, and build authentic relationships that helpfully are going to help them in the rest of their lives. And I guess as a culture, I mean, this is a too big a ask for us, but I hope that our culture shifts from being such a performance-orientated, stat-driven culture, where we start to look at the bigger picture of someone's well-being, their spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical health all being linked, instead of just highlighting maybe the intellect as the most highest standard that we look up to.
Patrick Regan, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Take care.
Thank you to Patrick Regan. I love the work he's doing, especially within the church community, which as I alluded to during that interview, I often find that personal development and self-help can sometimes be seen as a weakness within church communities. And I really hope that with the work that Patrick does, that can change. I'm sure you've heard the news reports, the media reports about the effects of social media on young people. We touched on that in the interview. But I do feel that there's enormous pressure, particularly on young people, to live the perfect life, this perfect kind of Instagram life that we see on social media. And there has been a call, as you know, for companies such as Facebook and Twitter to be required by law to share data with researchers to help examine the potential harm to young people's health and identify, who's at risk. And of course, that's because of the link between the use of devices and networking sites, which is recognised can lead to everything from poor sleep to bullying and mental health issues. And it's been mooted now that companies should be compelled to protect their users, and legislation is needed to enable access for data so that they can do these studies. So here's hoping. Let's see what happens. And meanwhile, I met another great guy at the Best You Expo where I was speaking last week. Richard is a filmmaker from Brick in the Wall Media, and together with a colleague, executive producer Richard Grannon, they've made a film called Plugged In about the true toxicity of social media. And the blurb says, spiralling rates of mental health issues among young people, including increased suicide rates and a near doubling of eating disorders, led us to look into the effect social media could be having on our youth. From this investigation was born a documentary, Plugged In, a shocking exploration into the hidden toxicity of the social media platforms and the way they deliberately provoke negative emotional and mental states in their users for profit. Sad, isn't it? It's a thing. So check out the documentary. It's called Plugged In. You can just Google it, I'm sure. And I'm going to try and see whether I can get Richard Grannon to come on the podcast. I think he'd have some interesting insights around not just social media and mental health, but also around addiction. And this completely correlates, of course, with what Patrick Regan was saying. So, have a look. My guests coming up in the next few weeks, those I've got definitely. for you, lined up for you, include the lovely Kitty Waters, who hosts a podcast called Kitty Talks. She's going to be talking about creating the life you love, doing your dharma, finding your life purpose, because it's really interesting. So often when people give up the booze, it leaves a kind of hole in your life, and you've got a lot of time on your hands, but you can feel kind of out of sorts and for a little while unsure who you even are anymore. So that's going to be an interesting interview. I'll also run my interview with Belle from Tired of Thinking About Drinking. And as I mentioned last week as well, some of the guys from behind the brands of the cool alcohol-free drinks, such as Sea Arch. That's one of my current faves. It's a really great alternative to gin. So do make sure you follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, and it's just at Janey Lee Grace, and use the hashtag Stay Dry Till July and share some of those best self-care tips. Little things are fine, and we'd love to hear your stories, your success stories, or your not so successful stories. It would be great to hear from you. Drop us an email, janey@janeyleegrace.com. And once again, as we're fairly new, we'd so appreciate it if you'd subscribe on iTunes and rate the show for us, and maybe leave us a review if you're enjoying it. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Free Life podcast with Janey Lee Grace. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, rate us, share on social media, and tune in again.